You know, Socrates, that one day technology will be so advanced that computers will be designed to even outwit and outthink human beings?
Well, Richard, I suppose it makes some sense to say that someday computers will be better at something that we humans think we're best at. But there are several questions I'd like to have answered before we say either way.
Well, what more is there to think about, Socrates? They can already add, subtract. They can even reason faster and more efficiently than human beings could ever do.
I agree. Very soon, we will have mastered understanding the human brain. We will soon simulate human thinking and perhaps even surpass it.
Wait a minute, Tina. Excuse me for interrupting you, but I want to focus on your use of the term thinking. Do you believe that there are already some machines that think?
Well, of course, Socrates. But let's be honest. There are computers that everyone is familiar with that think. They behave by sending messages to the user on video monitors telling of their inner states.
So by thinking, you mean sending messages.
Well, that's at least one thing I think is important.
So a thinking machine would be any device that sends messages.
For the sake of argument, I'll give a provisional yes.
Then a telegraph key is a thinking machine, according to your provisional definition.
You've always been known for nitpicking, Socrates, and Tina did say something about inner states. Well, maybe we should add a provisional definition that a thinking device communicates its inner thoughts.
Is that definition okay with you?
It sounds a little better.
Then our first attempted definition of a thinking machine is any device that communicates messages about its inner state.
Sounds good.
Okay for now, Socrates.
Then we can infer that a telegraph and a toaster are not thinking machines because they don't have inner states.
Well, so far, so good.
I certainly hope so. I would hate to think of my toaster communicating its inner states by my burnt toast this morning.
But there is still one issue that we've left unsettled. Do you know what I'm thinking of?
No doubt we've forgotten something.
Yeah, it's this business of inner states. How can we be so sure that toasters and telegraphs don't have inner states? We can't just assume it.
What are inner states?
Yes, and especially because we haven't defined that term, I don't think we know what we're talking about.
Well, looks like a trip to the library.
Yeah, do some brainstorming.
Shall we meet here again tomorrow after we've done some research and independent thinking?
You mean critical thinking.
Sounds good.
Precisely. Gather your facts and your thoughts, and we'll inquire into this further.
Well, hello and welcome to Critical Thinking. For all you philosophy students out there, I hope that this gives you some feel for how it is that Socrates was able in dialogue to convey some of the basic principles behind critical thinking. The preceding scene was simply designed as an attempt to try to recreate an event that transpired 2,400 years ago. But what was true of that dialogue is just as true of good dialogue today. And I use the term dialogue to mean, by definition, questioning and answering honestly and openly with an attempt to try to discover the truth and the clarification of definitions, concepts, and also to figure out how good an argument is. In what follows, I hope to outline exactly what I've just talked about, with the idea in mind that perhaps what you can do is use it for a paper. You should be able to think about, given what this video is able to present, at least in basic and fundamental outline form, should be able to produce a paper of very decent quality. At least it's a preparatory guide for that. If you have any further questions, join me at my live office hour every Saturday. Bye for now.
Let us observe now a group of students practicing some critical thinking techniques in their attempt to answer the question, what is critical thinking?
I think critical thinking, to me, is a process based on a combination of real-life experiences and formal education which guides an individual to make the proper choices.
To me, critical thinking is the pursuit of personal truth as applied to our environment, even at the expense of letting go personally held beliefs.
Critical thinking to me is based on a definite openness and being open to all the variables that you're introduced to, and be able to take them in and evaluate them for what they're worth without introducing hang-ups that you hold about previous views.
In critical thinking, I feel desires are probably the most important part, and coming to understand the absolute truth. desire to be unbiased in as far as the topic is concerned, to come full circle and look at a problem in every aspect of it, not just your own interpretation of what you actually think is happening.
I think that critical thinking is completely necessary in growth academically, personally. I think it's key in getting along because, first of all, critical thinking forces you to look at all aspects of a situation, whether it's an encounter with another person or a set of ideas or a problem, because it forces you to look empirically at the facts that are supporting it, logically, analytically, and on the other hand, it makes you look at all of the emotional issues associated with it.
Many of our ideas are shaped into us by our experiences that we had when we were growing up. To build upon the foundations of our own formulas of knowledge, we have to integrate the usages of other forms of knowledge.
As you can see, the students in this philosophy class are seriously exchanging their individual views on the subject of what it means to think critically. In a cooperative group, as interested students interacting through dialogue, they have come up with the basic idea behind all critical thinking. Just see how close their reflections resemble the definition given by professional philosophers Michael Scriven and Richard Paul, who say, critical thinking is the intellectually disciplined process of actively and skillfully conceptualizing, applying, analyzing, synthesizing, and/or evaluating information gathered from or generated by observation, experience, reflection, reasoning, or communication as a guide to belief and action. Philosophers, scientists, inventors, and many kinds of problem solver have long stressed the significance of critical thinking and dialogue to the full understanding of complex issues and questions such as, what is happiness? Was the universe created or did it just happen? Is there a God? And, am I free or am I the product of pre-existing conditions and forces? These are difficult subjects, and there have been many proposals given for every one of these problems. To understand and evaluate them and to create solutions of your own, you must remember that the key ingredient is critical thinking. Philosophers, theologians, psychologists, students, and anyone interested in these and other hotly debated issues use the process of critical thinking. We will show that critical thinking techniques can be used to conduct dialogue and other sorts of inquiry not only on issues such as these, but that the same techniques can be used successfully to discuss almost any contemporary issue or academic problem. For example, what is the meaning of a poem? Do we really have an environmental crisis? Do computers think? Critical thinking can help us learn, listen, focus on key ideas, brainstorm, and appropriately reach reliable conclusions about any of the issues presented for dialogue and inquiry. Why is being able to think critically so important? Without the probing and systematic use of critical thinking skills used in the exchange of ideas in the way our group of students are shown doing, we would not have advanced in any academic discipline, including those of science or humanities. This is because critical thinking inquires into our cherished assumptions and scrutinizes the conventional reasons for the way we think, or concerns itself with such subjects even as, should I go to college? And, is abortion moral? Indeed, the critical thinking methodology of scholarship and science is the same one we need when we take up such practical and personal questions as these. Without the benefits of critical thinking and dialogue, many of us might even still be flat earthers. Here you see some students carrying on a discussion about a current controversial issue of the type you might find assigned for discussion in a critical thinking class, namely, whether or not women are more logical than men. Let's listen for a moment to see if the essential ingredient of critical thinking is present in this discussion.
In my view, I feel that women are more logical than men because they have much better reasoning skills than men and are able to break down an argument much better than men and rationalize it logically. Also, they have a better vocabulary than men and are able to convey their thoughts more adequately to others.
I think your outlook is completely warped. You're hiding behind a woman's skirts. If you keep on thinking that way, you're not going to get anywhere in life and you're not going to pass this class.
Now, wait a minute, Jennifer. Have a heart for the guy. I mean, he is trying to look at it from a woman's perspective.
What's your problem? You sound like a mama's boy or a feminist or something. I mean, were you raised only by women? Didn't you have any male role model as a child? I mean, come on, this is a man's world, and if you believe that way, then you aren't going to get anywhere in life.
Women have a better vocabulary than men? What does that got to do with anything? Does that just mean they use longer words, better words, more words? I don't understand what that has to do with critical thinking at all.
As you can clearly see, these students are indeed exchanging their opinions. Some are visibly upset or perhaps even insulted or turned off. What's happening is that while a form of discussion is going on, critical thinking is not. No one is offering support in the way of evidence for his or her factual claim, nor defining and clarifying key concepts. In short, none of the participants is using critical thinking to spell out the reasoning involved in coming to a conclusion. As you can clearly see, these students are indeed exchanging their opinions. Three important features of the critical thinking process are concept clarification, fact claim verification, and argument inference validation. And these elements are noticeably missing. Instead, the tone of the group is anxious and no progress is being made toward clarifying the issue, examining claims, nor understanding each other. The group members are engaged more in putting down and attacking each other than they are in reasonable and reflective thinking and discussion. It is obvious that they are also not learning from each other and are contributing more confusion to the problem than reasoned understanding. The group members have all committed at least one informal fallacy. We may identify them as follows. Attacking the person. The speaker was accused of being a feminist, and that has nothing really to do with his claim and functions as a distraction aimed at the speaker himself. Appeal to force or intimidation. Our arguer here is threatening the speaker with the possibility of getting a bad grade if he doesn't change his view. Again, having nothing to do with the speaker's claim that women are more logical than men. Appeal to pity. While this participant means well, she offers nothing directly in the way of reasoning or support for or against the claim in question, and instead simply asks that others have a heart. Straw man. At first, this participant seems to be on track in his remarks. However, he is not actually questioning into the reasoning behind the speaker's claim. He is instead deliberately misrepresenting the argument so as to make it easier to criticize. Neither he nor any of the other arguers are engaged in critical thinking about the issue. This, then, is a logically unhealthy, dysfunctional group.
So, Socrates, would you please explain to us what you consider an argument really to consist of? What is it we should be thinking when we think critically?
Argument, very simply, is a set or group of statements where one is said to follow from or be implied by the rest. In other words, one or more of the statements is support or evidence for what you are claiming, and what you're claiming is your conclusion. You see, Jennifer, if I am critical of you and the other students, if I seem to examine your ideas with a fine-tooth comb, it is to understand the reasons for what you're claiming, and not with any intent of angering or embarrassing you or any of the rest. The purpose of creating and exchanging arguments in rational dialogue is to achieve understanding, not only of the issues at hand, but of each other and ourselves. I should say that it is only through critical thinking and the examined life that we humans will ever achieve true clarity of purpose, thought, and action.
He wants genuinely to understand their arguments and claims in order to become more enlightened about the way we think about an issue and why. With Socrates in mind, let us see now if we can demonstrate the main elements of critical thinking through setting up a model dialogue group for the purpose of answering some tough questions. The basic elements of critical thinking for purposes of organizing and developing inquiry groups and for avoiding some of the pitfalls in the inadvertent use of fallacies and fallacious reasoning are concept clarification, fact claim verification, and argument inference validation. The first step in critical thinking is concept clarification and involves first selecting a topic, issue, or problem for discussion.
And we will begin this dialogue discussion by brainstorming some of the terms that we will be using in our discussion.
Group members now critically examine the issues using their critical thinking skills to brainstorm and analyze word meanings and definitions. The next step is fact-claim verification. The last step is argument inference validation. At this point, critical thinkers cooperatively discuss possible pro and con arguments as well as argument structure in order to clarify and evaluate reasoning methods.
I thought that thinking means to call to mind or to remember or to exercise the power of judgment. And it means that one is able to call an idea to mind by mental effort. A computer can be programmed to do all these things just like a person is programmed since they were born. I think it follows that computers can think and consequently match artificial intelligence with human intelligence.
The group members actively practice the critical thinking skills of listening critically, focusing on reasoning patterns, and asking questions to clarify what is being said. This group is actively practicing critical thinking through dialogue and is now logically healthy. A logically healthy group has the following characteristics. As critical thinkers, participants avoid fallacies such as attacking the person and arguing by intimidation. The participants remain objective and do not become ill-tempered, and they avoid emotional bias and prejudicial viewpoints. Participants concentrate on the reasoning behind the claims and arguments of others. They seek the truth for the sake of greater understanding and self-awareness. We may now say that the members in our logically healthy group of critical thinkers have experienced genuine gains both in insight and understanding through practicing the dialogue method that we have outlined here. But remember that critical thinking is not simply a mechanical procedure. A significant part of the critical thinking mental attitude concerns creativity as well as the application of recognized reasoning techniques. So, as probably any chef will tell you, sometimes you have to flavor the process of cooking your own meal with your own seasoning. You could then say that we each have to give seasoning to our reasoning. And this means be creative. First, critical thinking is an exercise in self-examination, so you must become aware of your own biases and assumptions on issues under discussion. Otherwise, undetected biases behind your reasoning can interfere with objectivity in the search for truth. Also, many of us tend to stereotype others, as did the arguers in our logically unhealthy group. This will only interfere with understanding and clarification of the issue. Second, using any one of the numerous currently available textbooks on logic will help you to examine and evaluate your own arguments and claims and those of others and help you structure your thinking on a particular issue.